Hello. Hi, everyone. So transformation. They asked me to come here to speak about transformation. For me, well, transformation, this is the definition of transformation, a change in form, nature, or appearance of something or someone. And for me, architects, we are okay at transforming things, but I think the profession who is really, really good and we should learn about transformation are magicians. I think magicians they had been working on this for centuries, kind of like they had been able to make rabbits from hats, flowers from sticks, and I think we should kind of like try to focus on what they do. Unfortunately, I'm not a magician, sorry for the disappointment, so I'm not going to do any kind of like magic trick here. Yeah, I'm just an architect, like probably as many as you, kind of like I started to work as an intern, trying to do some projects. This was in Barcelona in a market, and then some towers in Mexico. And then I started with my own little practice, making a house for my math teacher. And then winning with some friends or get awarding on some international competitions. This was a competition in Warsaw. But yeah, today I'm not going to speak too much about architecture itself. They asked me to speak about transformations. So I just handpicked a few kind of like of my projects related with transforming things. And I'm going to talk about those. Then I'm going to talk about other projects that they are not mine, that I think they are really good examples of transformation, kind of almost magic. And then I'm going to close up the little talk about giving some tips or some clues about if you want to engage on these things of transformation, what kind of tools you could get. So starting with my transformations, I think I'm going to have 30 little projects, so they're really, really small. I like little tapas. I'm Spanish, so it's kind of like little appetizers on really little things. They were projects that they have not done in a professional environment. They were, well, most of them while I was a student, so they are really little things, but I think some of them have some sense instead of this context. For example, one of the things that I didn't like about cities at all are the cigarette butts, that they are as litter. They are something that smells bad and it looks really ugly. So one transformation that I did a long time ago, it was to put little seeds on the cigarette butts, so when it rains, the filter gets humidity and a flower can grow. Or another thing that it annoys me quite a lot of cities are these bollards that they're completely useless. You cannot sit on it because the bollard gets into your ass. So this was just a little adaptation, so it's like the bone that is left, so you cannot get that into your body. Or this was even before when I was a teenager, I just made this transformation of the handle with a bike horn. So when my parents were coming into the room and I was a teenager, I didn't want anything to happen, like the so you could see when they were coming. Or I was studying with Andreas, and I don't know if you remember Andreas in the university. In Spain, people are quite misbehaved, and they put the chewing gum under the chair. So I just kind of like look for a resin that could harden the chewing gum, and at the end you could almost clone and copy that chair on chewing gums itself. Or the same with seats. In Spain, we used to eat a lot of seats, so you could build your furniture while eating seats. Or now I live in London, and in London, one of the most annoying things that I find is I pay quite a lot of money for just square meter of rent, and most of the houses that I live on, they have this kind of like really ugly wardrobes just to have your mop. So I just transformed one mop into one invisible mop, so you can kind of like put it in your, not in your big drawer, but like in the small things. Or this was one of my first projects when I was in architectural school. I call it the Calipo house, like the ice cream, like goes up and down, so you don't see it when it's around. So it's as well like kind of like little transformation of the environment. Or another thing that I would like to transform, if I was a magician, I'm not, but like is cars on cities. Cars are kind of like private property in public space, and there is not offering anything towards the citizen. So what you can do in order to transform that, and that was kind of like an idea of like if you could make car into benches and little kind of like models or thoughts about what that could be. So you could use the music of the cars if you have a car on the city. Or little transformations around materials. This was a little project as well as a student in Chile, and playing around plastic bags and how you could make really simple toys that they are balls to play football or basketball, and depends on how much pressure and how much heat you put, it bounces more or less. And this become a kind of like a project that roll on different countries. So I was doing this on different places. These are kids from Turkey, kind of like just making their own balls. And you could make different shapes. This is a llama in South America, in Chile. You could see like they quite enjoy like the poor kid over there, kind of like took over the llama. Similar transformations as well. As I was a student, IKEA approaches as well, and they said, you have 1,000 euros to make a little house. And at that point, David, that is here, he was moving to a new house. So we just bought furniture for his house with this 1,000 euros. And with the bags of the shopping, we just made this inflatable little house. So we transformed the bags into that. Or the same in India, but they don't have plastic bags there. They have a lot of paper. So we made a little building, and with shopping bags, you can build as well quite a lot of big structures. One of the objects that I have been as well quite fascinated with since a long time is plastic bottles. And this was a project around architecture, what you could do with architecture with plastic bottles without have to melt in them, etc. So we just organized with a really simple technique where we can put plastic bottles into bags and just vacuum those bags. And you can get a rigid structure, similar to coffee or when you put kind of like your clothes in your wardrobe. And with my friend Maciek, we started to collect a lot of bottles. And we did some early prototypes with some kind of like, inflatables. And we were taking the air, and then we were building arches. And that kind of like started to pick up in different cities. So this was in Poland, and then we went to the Venice Biennale. I think that was kind of like a few years ago. This was in Paris, again in Poland. And the great thing of this building is like you engage quite a lot of people in the community, and they were transformable. So kind of like when you wanted to change the shape of your building, you just put a bit of air, you change the shape, and you take the air out again. And at night, they were quite beautiful. Some failing transformations. So I was in Sweden studying, and I don't know why, we decided to try to cross a lake with an inflatable, and we fell extremely badly in the middle. So not all the transformations won't go well. This, again, is a project that I did as a student that was looking, again, into how things could transform structurally. So this was looking into scissor systems that had been kind of like structures that had been there since a long time to make a lot of different things. Buckminster Fuller used it a long time ago, and then Calatrava used it, and now there is a lot of these toys of Hoverman. I don't know if you have seen them, these little balls. But most of these things, they have not been used in architecture that much, and if they have been used, they have been used normally to make really horizontal buildings. And the idea of this exploration, it was to see where we could go to make different kind of structures or buildings that could grow not only horizontally, but like vertically as well. And the system is really simple. You just open one of the scissor system, and all of them kind of like open. So you can expand up to 97% of the initial volume. You can see this is one of the latest ones. So you just open around the structure and the place. And then with these prototypes, I started to reformulate what was around and try to understand the geometry of them, and I was trying to scale it up and to see how big we could make this tower. And theoretically, you can make a tower quite big, so the idea was to make a tower of 12 storage that you can deploy in 3 hours. So you can have the whole construction process really, really quickly. So that was kind of like a transformation, and that you could apply on different contexts. So I was reading the news at that time, and there was a gas explosion on one of the neighborhoods in Madrid, so you could replace those houses. Or at that point in Spain, Madrid was trying to get the Olympic Games, and they were getting crazy in terms of making buildings that at the end no one used. So if they would have used this kind of system, they could rent it out to Rio or to whatever city they needed, or a construction site. And you can achieve different kind of spaces, even if it's like a structural system. I adapted as well in a small version. I call it Villa Rotonda, where the idea is that like you could have one of these little structures in your car. So I did this little movie with my friend Jaime. So yeah, the idea is that like you could make use of the runabouts, that there are spaces that there is grass and they are free and they are everywhere, and you have water and electricity, and you don't disturb anyone. So you can put them there and enjoy. Good. I think you got more or less kind of like the concept. I was quite fascinated with these transformation, structural transformations. I did some of them in other places as well. This was in India, a dome, or this was again with kids in Turkey, like doing just little toys, like they were snakes that just kind of like open and close. And as well, I started to try to think if there was any other kind of structural entity that could transform quite well. And looking at the nature has these properties called phenotypic plasticity. It's quite redundant name, but like basically it's quite amazing. Like if you use quite a lot a bone or a structure in your body, it becomes harder, right? If you use a lot, I don't know, whatever object you have around you, it gets weaker. So how you could translate those kind of properties that nature has into human-made objects? So we were looking. These are the structures of the bones, and depends where you put more forces. There's that part of the structure gets more rigid. So we were looking into which kind of unit, a structural unit, could work better for adapting to those forces. And yeah, we were experimenting quite a lot with tensegrity and other kind of units that could adapt as you put more or less force. I'm not going to explain that much on this project, but like basically we were able to do structures that you could reshape depending on whatever conditions you have. And those color structures could be applied on different kind of scales, from a small scale, so you could kind of like just change the curvature and have it on your computer, or likewise. Or in a bigger scale, imagine in a building where you could change the section depending on the weather or depending on whatever conditions you have. Another transformation or rethought of things. Suitcase, really stupid object. It's a box that 100 years ago, someone thought, okay, let's put it a handle, and that was the Samsonite suitcase. And not long time ago, I'm pretty sure most of you will remember, the suitcase didn't have wheels. That this seems like the most simple kind of like innovation, but like didn't have wheels. So this was looking at what could be the next evolution of suitcase, or what could be the next transformation of suitcase. And basically, it's a suitcase that have Bluetooth. So it triangulates the signal of your phone and just follows you kind of like 1 meter behind. So it's quite simple, kind of like, and that technology had been there for a long time on vacuum cleaners and golf trolleys, but I think nowadays there's not too many kind of like things around that. So we did a few prototypes. You could see on the videos, I'm kind of like walking slow because like the suitcase was quite slow at that time. But yeah. We use the technology of the suitcase as well for other random things, trying to transform here a soccer ball. So it was controlled remote. And the idea here as well, it was to start to think kind of like what you can give to kids that they can play at the same time video games, but in a physical way. So you could play against Cristiano Ronaldo, you can imagine, but at the end, the most fun thing was just to play around with the kids and don't tell them what it was. And so they were just kicking the ball and coming back. So you just make the ball come back. Or bikes. I like quite a lot bikes, but like I like quite a lot foldable things, as you could see on the previous project. And I have this frustration that most of the bikes affordable bikes have small wheels, and they're quite expensive. So I just kind of like with a biostable material, made a few prototypes of a few bikes that they are really simple to fold and quite cheap to make. So it's basically a joint that you can open and close. I think you can see it here. So it's as simple as kind of like opening the bike, and the material itself kind of like gets stable, and you can ride it. Or another observation in terms of cycling, like when you cycle, you cannot listen to music because you need to be aware of the traffic around you. But there is another way to listen to music. I didn't know. I don't know if you. I didn't know before. But when I started this project, I realized that it's through bone conduction. So instead of like through the vibration of the air, it's the vibration of your body. So this was basically to have a transducer through your bone, so you could listen, and it kind of works. So it's a nice experience. New transformation as well. This is a bit architectural related. So we got commissioned by the Warsaw Museum of Modern Art to transform this old school that was going to be demolished to build a Zaha Hadid tower into a museum with almost no budget and quite little. And you could see the interior of the school was not that interesting. And what we decided with my friend Maciek is like, okay, let's play around with what magicians normally do. And magicians, they use quite a lot the tool of misdirection. That is kind of like catching the attention somewhere where at the same time they do something else. So this is kind of like what we use on this project. We just rented out all the construction tools, like all the demolition tools that we could find on all the stores around Warsaw, and we start to kind of like demolish parts of the building in order to kind of like just focus the attention on certain parts of the existing building. And with that kind of a specific tool, we just kind of like build. It was a pretty big kind of like exhibition where we didn't took anything into the exhibition. We just took some parts out in order to focus the attention, and all the elements as well they were part of the classrooms. So you could see these were the seats that we transform into little plinths, etc. And each room, they have different kind of demolition. So this was just with the pneumatic hammer, like doing just boom, boom, boom. We thought of another little object that is around toothbrushes. That, again, I think is an object that have not transformed that much or had transformed in the past, but like I think we are quite stuck with the electric toothbrush at the moment. And at that point, I was studying in Sweden, and I was quite fascinated by the snook, right? You call it a snook? The thing that you put in terms of tobacco in your mouth, and how that works. And as well, how nature do this kind of like clean your teeth. So yeah, basically it's a little toothbrush that you can put in your mouth, and it gets energy from your saliva and cleans your teeth at the same time. I think the most interesting part of this project is a bit the prototyping, that it was about getting the smallest motor as possible and getting it to work with saliva. That was the most kind of like disgusting thing ever. But I think it went all right. I think that was a part of the saliva and try to get voltage from it. Anyway, I think we're going to skip through it. To one of the projects that I'm going to stop for a bit, because this is the project I'm working currently. Again, it's looking at this fascinating object that is a plastic bottle. I'm pretty sure all of you are familiar. You have been using it for a while. What I didn't know is that, like, to make one of these bottles, you need 7 liters of water. That is quite a lot, and we use quite a lot. Could you guess how many bottles you use per year? A number, random number, or an average person in this planet? 300? It's a bit less. So we use around 200 per person per year, and this is a curve that is going higher and higher every year. So every year, there's a 10% more in the world of plastic bottles, and this is happening mostly not in developed countries, but like in countries that they are emerging at the moment. So like the curve is quite drastic, and you find them everywhere. So that's why, kind of like with my colleague Pierre and Guillaume, we created this. We call it Ojo. So basically, it's a membrane made of seaweed that is really simple. It's biodegradable, and it's even edible, so you can eat it. So you can either kind of like put it all in your mouth or just in front of corner. Cheers. is a membrane because nature uses membranes. It's the most efficient way to contain liquids or any kind of things. You use really small amount of material. And this membrane is made of a brown seaweed that you extract from it. I think in Norway you have quite a lot of those. And this technology is not new. We didn't come out with that. It's a technology that had been used for a long time to make mostly fake caviar. I don't know if you know, but my grandma really loves them in Christmas. We have quite a lot of those. And the idea was simple. Like we just make this little ball, put it on the hands of consumers, try to see if this was kind of like working or not. And yeah, it was quite good to get feedback, to come back to the drawing board in terms of like, yeah, this is not hygienic. I say, okay, it's true, it's not hygienic. Or you cannot close it back. But then you come back again to the reference to nature, and it's like, okay, how nature does these things. And if you think about orange, you have a bigger kind of membrane that you peel, and you have small segments inside. So it's kind of like what we had been trying to do. So you have kind of like a bigger membrane, and then you can peel it off, and you have the small segments inside. And we started, I'm not a chemist, neither a magician, but like what we started was on the kitchen. And it was quite nice how this project was deployed, because we licensed the first recipe as Creative Commons, so everyone could look on internet. We put a recipe, and everyone could make it. So this is a kind of like the first recipe that we put online. And it got quite a lot of, like, I think 20 million views overnight. And the most amazing thing is like, a lot of people started to replicate it. So I think this is the biggest show in Japan, kind of like showing a superstar of sports how to make ojos, or some people as well in Germany, in the States, and in Korea. Everyone trying to improve the recipe and making something better. And that gave us quite a lot of confidence. It's like, okay, here there is something. Let's try to work on it. So we started to see if this could work as a company. And we went to the first kind of, I think this was the World Water Conference, bottled water, I don't know how to name it anymore, but it's all the people who make plastic bottles and us. And it was quite funny interaction. And thanks to some awards that we got and some funding, we didn't got all of them. You could see my face of disappointment there after listening to that big chat. We were able to put a team of chemists working in London, where we are based, to look into the properties of the membrane. So kind of like basically what we do is, we play with different seaweeds to try to extract different alginates. That is what we use, and try to work with different membranes and try to look into diffusion test, etc. One essential part of what we do is to test it. So we try to test it as much as we can with consumer in every different kind of scenario that we can, from private events to street markets to marathons, etc. Some of the things on the lab, diffusion test. We don't do only water, we can do other things. And the goal as well for now had been into making a machine, because the idea is that you could produce them almost on a spot. So the idea is that the same way that you make coffee on a spot, you don't need to transport water if you're doing a marathon, for example. You could have a little machine and produce. So for doing this, kind of like we put a online campaign, a crowdfunding campaign, and we got really quickly, in 2 days, we got $1 million to put together this machine, which was quite nice, and a lot of support. A lot of people kind of like were, come on, you can do it. So now we have a first prototype of the machine in our office in London, and that allows us as well to make different shapes. So we can do now kind of like little pillow shapes, and to be used at the moment is not a product like a plastic bottle. It's not as resistant. It doesn't last that long as a plastic bottle, but it's really similar to fruits. So what we had been doing is the same thing that if you will do it if you have a fruit company. So we had been doing it on festivals, quite a lot of marathons. So last week we had been doing, I think, so far probably 20 marathons, but last week was the first one where we just use only, because normally we had two alternatives, either plastic, either ojos for the runners. And it was the first one that we just did completely with ojos, and that went quite well. We have been selling on supermarkets, different uses and different cordials, on festivals. Last week as well, we opened a bar in London with different cocktails. And we try quite a lot. We're quite playful in terms of like we organize quite a lot of little dinners, and this is what we do. So we do like dun, dun, and we transform it into little things. And it's always quite fun. these kind of transformations. We had been playing as well with other kind of shampoos and gels for different scenarios. So you could imagine buying your gels on meters and combine the gel with the shampoo, with the cream. These are some of the user cases that you could imagine of the product. Yeah, either energy gels or little toiletries for hotels. Sauces. Yeah. And the most important part of what we do is to test, and test. So yeah, some of the marathons that we have been doing, etc. More products, we have been able to play as well with jams and other more viscous things in order to make it round or square. Currently, we are kind of like having a partnership with Just Eat. I'm not sure if in Norway there is Just Eat. It's a delivery company. It's one of the biggest delivery companies in the world, where they deliver now the ketchup and mayo in our packaging, which is kind of like quite good in terms of scale. This is the promotional video that they did. It's a bit cheesy in terms of like no plastic, blah, blah, blah. But I think explains a bit well the concept and how to use it. So we did a first trial with them of 6 weeks, and that went quite well. And now we are trying to see how many more restaurants we can engage into this. Besides that, kind of like we form a company with my friend Pierre, and the goal of this company is not just Ojo, but like is to try to kind of like find alternatives for this big problem that we are in as a society of plastic packaging, with the goal of making plastic kind of disappear for this kind of application, which makes sense to make it disappear. So we have been working with a lot of different things, from nets for supermarkets to liners inside of the coffee cups, and yeah, we expect that this will have some impact. So that's Ojo. That's some of my transformations. I'm going to talk really quickly about other people's transformation that I quite enjoyed. Again, kind of coming back to this analogy of almost architects as magicians, right? And trying to kind of like as well look at what is the trick behind, yeah. So one of probably you know most of them, but like one magician that I really appreciate as an architect is Gunjai Shigami. I don't know if, for example, if you know this project, he had made a 9.5 meters table with just 3 millimeters steel. And I don't know if you know the trick behind it, but like basically he planned what was going to be on top of that table. So all of this is whatever apple or whatever cutlery, and calculated the forces that there was going to be on that table. So the table initially was not flat. The table, it was a curve. So wherever you put everything on top of the table was completely flat. Or this is Max Lamb, another magician in my opinion, more a designer than an architect, but like he works a lot with different kind of really simple materials, but like pushing it to the limit. And in this case, he's on the beach, making some holes on the sand and casting a bit of I don't know if it's aluminium or putty. And then at the end, you can get a quite nice kind of like a stool out of almost nothing. Same designer, Max Lamb, making something levitate as heavy as I think this is over a ton of granite on Milan, just by using air. So you could see straight away what's the trick. Marcus Keisa, as well from the Royal College of Art from London, he had been trying to use as well really simple elements like the sand to create things. In this case, using sand and the sand to melt it. So he's able to transform, again, kind of like really simple materials with almost no process involved into into some kind of promising, at least, technologies. Probably the outcomes are not as relevant as the process itself, but like I think it's still quite magical. This is some of the objects that he kind of solar print. Same guy, together with Nori Oxman in the MIT Media Lab, working a bit with nature and metamorphosis and silkworms to build the silk pavilion. So they don't do the job. It's the worms who kind of like do the job, which I find extremely kind of like as well, engaging and incredible in terms of how to transform things, not by doing it yourself, but like letting someone else to transform it. A bit creepy, right? No. Or the work of Gramazio Collar and the research group that they have in ETH. I'm not sure if you are familiar with it, but like it's quite similar as well, working with the strings and digital tools as well. So in this case, they lay out a little string and they put some gravel, some little rocks into a kind of a box, and they keep laying out the string. By the end of the process, they end up with a big kind of like tower that they unblock, and they have this. And the best part for me is the deconstruction. So they just need to take out the reel, and the towers start to disappear, because it's the combination of the string plus the rocks what it makes it consistent. So again, to me, that's quite magical transformation in a way in architecture. Yeah, great. So I think I have 5 minutes left, and they asked me as well, kind of like, to give some ideas of like, what if you want to do your own transformation? What you could do? And from my kind of like little experience, what I found quite useful in terms of they're more attitudes more than tips. Like are really simple. Imagine if like you have an idea and you can symbolize that idea with a ball. What I think it's extremely useful for those ideas to become something, to score a goal, is that first you need first to understand where that idea is, kind of like to look and to listen quite well. Second is to pass that idea with as many people as you can in order to make the idea bigger and bigger. And the third tip is to kind of like try to shut kind of like as soon as you can, as soon as you see your net, try to hit goal. Again, to reiterate, I was trying to find an original analogy. I don't know how fan you are of hockey, but first you need to find the little disc, right, around if you want to score. Then once you have seen that the disc is there, like when you have feel that like you have an interesting idea, you need to pass it in order to be able to kind of like go really fast towards the other net. So you need to pass it fast, because by yourself it's really hard. You probably are going to get the ball nowhere. And then you need to shut. Doesn't matter kind of like doesn't matter if the net is completely kind of like full of things, you need to shut, because as many times you shut, the more chance you have to transform something to score. And this is kind of like a little summary of some little attitudes that I think for me are quite important and quite helpful to put on practice. I teach in London, and we use these 3 little tools to do different projects. I can put you some of the projects that I have done with the students. We do one specific project, it's called Fixperts, where we use these little things, and you will see it straight away. So it's done with first year students of product design, so it's not architecture, so they just build little things. And basically, we pair them up with different people, and with these 3 little tools of first observing which kind of problem they have and identify it. In this case, Edna, she cannot put her socks on. And then passing the ball, like prototyping as much as they can, and try to make different kind of stuff, they can find something kind of interesting or not, and then they need to shut, so they need to try it as soon as they have something. Again, I think this is shoehorn, and I think Edna kind of like it. So again, I think it's a transformation on someone's life, probably not a huge one, but I think Edna, I think this was done quite almost 2 years ago, and Edna still uses every day the sock horn to put her sock. This year we work with students, quite little kids with disabilities, and for example, this student was quite challenging to work with because she could not talk, she could not listen, she could not even stand on her own on a wheelchair. So the students it was quite challenging to have that kind of client in a way. And they just, in order to understand what she was going through, they just lay down for one day in the classroom and they realized it was really boring. So they just came up with this idea of like just putting a little mirror so she could interact with the rest of the classmates. Or just the last project, so last year students, again, first year students, so they work with Gabby, who is a lovely kid, and they found out that the best thing that they could do for her is to try to help her to eat by herself, because at this point she could not feed herself. So again, it's a bit of observation, a bit of passing ideas, so they were kind of prototyping as much as they could different random thoughts. You could see they were really complex at the beginning, and then I think they end up with a really simple, elegant solution that was kind of like putting a normal spoon, a really long flexi handle that she could wrap up around her arm and eat by herself. And to me, this kind of little transformation on someone else's life are the ones that makes the most different. And yeah. So yeah, try to look, pass, and shut. Thank you very much. I think that was all. Thank you.
Thank you.